This right here is my eastern coral snake, and he has quickly became one of my favorite snakes in my collection. He is also one of the most toxic. Eastern coral snakes possess one of the most complex toxins of any venomous animal on Earth. The only downside to keeping this reptile is he is extremely picky. This is why you don't see more of them in captivity. They do not want to eat anything in captivity. For the last few months, I've been assist feeding this snake, which is not ideal to say the least. This little baby Martinique lancehead that was stillborn that I'm feeding him here, no, he did not eat it. He just chewed on it for a little while. But the other day, he finally took his first meal on his own, and I caught it on camera. And today, we're going to check that out. This story starts off a little sad. As I was mowing, I actually hit this little baby 5-line skink. I didn't see him sitting down into the clump of grass, but as he was struggling, I got the idea that maybe my coral snake would try to eat this little guy. Because in the wild, coral snakes are typically ophiophagous, meaning that they eat other snakes, but I also know that they eat ground skinks typically as well, so I figured it would be worth a shot. Figuring that he had just been killed, this was one of my best chances to get this snake to eat. You might be thinking to yourself, first and foremost, that skink seems really small for that size of a snake, and you were completely right on that. But since he hasn't been eating very readily, it is good to start them off with a little bit of a smaller meal. Not only that, of course, this is the only skink that I had available. Next, if you're really thinking deep into it, you might be thinking, what about the parasites that this snake could possibly get from this wild animal like this? And this is something that we kind of need to take into consideration. But it's really easy and pretty safe for the snake to just go ahead and run them on an anti-parasitic every so often if you think it's really coming into play. It's a lot better for their health to be ran on an anti-parasitic than to wither away. Now, I don't typically agree with feeding wild animals to your pets, because I do believe it can screw up the natural ecology of wherever you captured that animal from if you do it often enough. But at the same time, this animal was going to pass away regardless. So I figured in this situation, it wasn't going to hurt anything. He now smells it. He is fully aware of what's inside his enclosure with him. So I took out all the leaves and everything that he hides underneath to try to get this on film. I also have a bright light. These guys are typically nocturnal and hide underneath the leaf litter, so this is very foreign to him. So I wasn't sure if he was going to eat on camera at all, but he's definitely showing some interest here, trying to figure out exactly what it is and if he's interested in eating it. One interesting thing about coral snakes found throughout the world is the fact that they have a toxin in their venom that as they bite the snake or lizard that they're about to eat, as it gets away, it'll actually start to tremor or have seizures. This allows the snake to be able to find it in the leaf litter regardless how far away it gets. It will actually follow these vibrations. Just interesting little thing to make up the coral snake's venom. Now, as you see, he's decided that he wants nothing to do with this skink. He's not going to eat it on this go. He's going to have to go check out his water dish first and make sure it's still there and that it still has water in it. Now, while he's over there investigating his water dish, this is probably about as good a time as any for me to bring up the fact that every time I post this guy on social media, people always recite to me the nursery rhyme, red on black, friend of Jack, red on yellow, kill a fellow. This is in reference to the fact that red on yellow signifies a coral snake, and red on black is typically a milk snake or a king snake, a harmless colubrid species. Now, if you was to follow this, there's quite a few people that would have been bitten out there, because the interesting thing about coral snakes is they don't rely on their camouflage to capture their prey. Since they're deep inside the leaf litter, they don't have to worry about predators nearly as often. So we've actually seen quite a few adult albino coral snakes in the wild thriving. We've also seen some very weirdly patterned individuals that does not follow this rhyme whatsoever. So this rhyme is a good rule of thumb, but always remember, if you can't 100% identify the species, don't go picking it up, because a bite from a coral snake would really suck. Now, another common misconception that I hear all the time when it comes to coral snakes is they're actually rear-fanged and they have to chew in order to inject venom. This is false. Their fangs are actually pretty far up into the front of their mouth, pretty much right at the front. They're not rear-fanged or mid-fanged whatsoever. They also don't need to chew to inject venom. That's a lot like saying that a cobra needs to chew to inject venom. Just because they do, don't mean that they have to. Now, one thing to take into consideration, this isn't really relevant to probably 99% of you guys, but they don't really strike like typical venomous snakes do. This video footage right here where he first grabs the skink is probably the closest I've ever seen him do to anything like a strike. It's not really the jolting forward. I've never seen any action like that from this animal. Now they will flail, but this is actually quite common in many elapids. They do this when they're upset, and that's probably a good way to get bit. I don't know, never been bit by any of them, so how am I supposed to know? What is interesting about the coral snake that we're feeding today, which I've mentioned in some prior videos, but I figure I'll bring up again, is the fact that they have one of the most complex structures found in any venom that we've ever studied when it comes to snakes. Scientists actually refer to this as an Octameric Complex, which is an 8-sided molecule found inside the venom of the eastern coral snake. Now this molecule, they do believe, could possibly bind to the receptors responsible for Alzheimer's in patients who do not show any signs of the disease thus far. Therefore, this venom could actually be used to early diagnose the pre-existing condition. So although snakes are scary and venom is terrifying because we always think about it being a negative, every poison, every venom can possibly be a cure. We just have to find it. So these snakes definitely need to be handled properly, but at the same time they need to be respected. I know many people hate venomous snakes, but truly they might be the one thing that could save your life someday. One interesting fact about the coral snakes is the fact that they're found throughout the Americas and throughout Asia. From genetic studies, we have found that most basal lineages are from Asia. This indicates that they actually originated in Asia, and the ones in the Americas are just distant relatives of those snakes. Now, what's interesting about many of the Asian coral snakes is the fact that their venom gland is actually very, very small up around the jaw, and this actually even gets thinner, as thin as a thread, and runs in between the ribs and actually goes down the body, anywhere from half to a third, maybe even 2/3 of the body. This was originally thought just to be in the long-glanded coral snake, but it seems as if it is in many of the Asian coral snakes. So this is thought to be an adaptation so then they can dig through the leaves and the dirt with ease without having that big bulky head, but still have a decent reserve of venom. One last fact for you guys before we wrap this up. The Arizona coral snake is actually able to make a farting or a popping noise out of its butt to distract a predator. This is one of the weirdest adaptations I've ever heard of. So if you want to see that, hopefully you guys will subscribe, because hopefully I can be getting to Arizona here very soon to see these amazing snakes in the wild. This guy is tired of my crap because he's dragging this lizard behind the water dish, and I'm not going to rearrange the camera because I was lucky to get him to eat in the first place. So hopefully you guys will subscribe. Thank you so much for checking out this video, and you all have a wonderful night.